People are living longer. This is, on balance, a really good thing. There's also something that can be very, very special and meaningful about caring for an older relative or an older friend. Those can be the very, very meaningful experiences, both for the person receiving the care and the person giving the care. So, however, you think about the phase in life when a lot of people are going to be in this position of needing to potentially care for an older relative. Well, for a lot of people, this hits in kind of your prime career years, your prime earning years, your 40s and your 50s. And there are limitations to that.
Hello, and welcome to Not Born Yesterday, a podcast dedicated to older adults and the challenges and joys of aging. I'm Miriam Goodman.
Not Born Yesterday is brought to you by Next Village SF, a local nonprofit providing older adults in the Northeast neighborhood of San Francisco with support to help age in place. I'm Lynn Winter-Gross.
Today on Not Born Yesterday, we're talking about good news and bad news. The good news is we're all living longer. Advances in health, medications, research, and disease all have had a positive effect on our longevity. If we stay healthy, many of us will live into our 90s and beyond and truly have our golden years. We might even become great-grandparents. But the bad news is we're living longer. This is bad news if you're concerned about having enough money to live comfortably as long as you can. Too many Americans have not saved enough or even thought about the needs they might confront as they age, like whether they will need caregivers in the home or decide to move to assisted living or other care facilities if they become unable to care for themselves. For those who are unprepared, those same golden years tarnish all too quickly.
Researchers estimate that more than 70% of Americans over 65 will need critical health services before they die. People who earn enough may be able to pay out of pocket for care, and low-income adults might get help through Medicaid. But for the middle class, long-term care can be a real financial crisis. Our guest today is Professor Robert Saldin, Professor of Political Science and Director of the University of Montana Mansfield Center for Ethics and Public Affairs. He's written extensively on the challenges of long-term care in our country. Professor Saldin, welcome to Not Born Yesterday.
Thanks, Lynn. Good to be here.
So how did we get to this point that so many older adults haven't considered how they're going to pay for long-term health care as they age? Surveys show that even though most people know they haven't saved enough for future healthcare needs, they haven't discussed it with family members, and they just kind of keep that anxiety to themselves. So are we all living in denial?
Well, Miriam, I really like the way you set this up initially, because we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that there's a lot of good news here, right? We are living longer. It's remarkable. You noted some of this stuff, but yeah, if you reach the age of 65 today, you're probably going to live past 85 years, right? I mean, that's remarkable. You think about some of the big social insurance programs we put in place back in the 60s and the 30s, Social Security, Medicare, people weren't living as long, right? So the time horizons that people had for those programs were much shorter than they are today. And this is all to the good. But you're right, there are big challenges with that. One of the things that a lot of people note about the United States is we have a kind of very youthful oriented culture. We have a very individualistic culture, and this does, a lot of people think anyway, lead to a situation where we don't spend a lot of time thinking about and focusing on those years when we aren't working, when the kids are out of the house, and that we are not very comfortable as a society thinking about these things, thinking about getting old, and not just necessarily getting old. People can think about getting old in the sense that, oh, we're going to play more golf or go on some cruises, but we don't like thinking about, what happens when we are not as mobile? What happens when we need some assistance with some of these just basic activities of daily living, like eating and taking a bath and things like this? Well, one of the things that happens when we're living longer is that more and more of us are going to need assistance with some of these things. So, you look at the projections now, it's something like 70% of those who reach the age of 65 are going to need some long-term care. If you're a man, you're looking at, on average, 1.5 years. Of course, it can vary considerably, but average is 1.5 years. If you're a woman, you're looking at 2.5 years. And the average cost of that care, and again, this can vary really, really extensively, but just the average cost is $138,000, right? So this is significant, and it is something that is a significant challenge for a lot of middle-class seniors. If you're really wealthy, you can cover these costs. It's also the case that if you're poor, Medicaid will swoop in. But if you're in the middle class, right, and it's important to note this is a very broad swath, a broad understanding of the middle class, right, from just above the poverty level up to the kinds of people who have maybe been retired for a couple decades and are still sitting on 6 figures in retirement savings. So they've done everything right. They think they're sitting on a real healthy nest egg, right? But that can go away really quickly when you're talking about the kinds of expenses that people incur when they're facing long-term care needs.
When I've talked to people in preparation for this discussion, I've said to them, well, do you know how you're going to pay for all of it? Oh, yeah, Medicare will pay for it all. Medicare is going to pay for all my costs for in-home care, for assisted living. I said, I don't think so.
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. I think this is one of the biggest problems is that there's just widespread ignorance about how we fund long-term care in this country. Something along the lines of 40% of American adults over the age of 40 assume that Medicare is going to step in and pay a nursing home bill or pay for that home health care worker to come and help them. And that is just not the case. For that person who's done everything right and put money away and saved, and you might have 6 figures in savings. Well, you can go through that really quickly because some of the costs, I mean, for a private room in a nursing home, you're looking at over $100,000 a year. So this stuff adds up really quick. And even if you're still able to live in your home but you need someone to come to your house to help cook or whatnot, well, home health care workers, you're looking at about $25 an hour, right? So do the math. If you need somebody, 8 hours a week, those things really add up.
And what about long-term health insurance, long-term care health insurance? Do enough people have this, and can you even buy it now?
Yeah, so there is private long-term care insurance. The problem is that it's in my view, at least, a totally dysfunctional marketplace. And I think the key thing is that not enough people are aware that this is an issue for the reasons we were just talking about. Something like only 4% of Americans carry this type of insurance. And of course, some of those people who have long-term care insurance are the people who are just being really responsible and have thought this through and are thinking about, trying to ease the burden on their kids and all of this. Great. But a lot of the 4% are people who, for one reason or another, are really concerned. They expect that they will need to be drawing on those policies in short order. For an insurance product to work in the private market, these insurance companies, they're for profit. They need more money coming in than going out. And so if you have a bunch of people who are drawing benefits, well, that's a big problem. You got to have a lot of people paying in and a lot of people who are not necessarily going to be pulling money out of the system, or else the thing is going to collapse. And that's one of the things to know about long-term care. It's not a static situation. A lot of times, maybe you start with somebody for 10 hours a week, but then the situation looks really different 6 months later or a year later.
We know that in many cases, family care is provided by family members. This means that people have to often give up their jobs so that they can take care of an elderly parent. Is there a better solution to this?
This is a huge part of the long-term care space. Unpaid family members, friends, taking care of, oftentimes an older parent. And you're right. There are consequences to that. Now, I always like to say, as Miriam started off this conversation with, hey, there is an upside to this. People are living longer. This is on balance a really good thing. There's also something that can be very, very special and meaningful about caring for an older relative or an older friend, right? Those can be the very, very meaningful experiences, both for the person receiving the care and the person giving the care. So again, it's not all bad. However, you think about the phase in life when a lot of people are going to be in this position of needing to potentially care for an older relative, right? Well, for a lot of people, this hits in kind of your prime career years, your prime earning years, your 40s and your 50s. And there are limitations to that. So I do think that's probably the single best thing we could do is try to raise awareness. Now, I'm not the first person to think of this. People have been trying to raise awareness about this stuff for decades.
You mentioned people wanting to age at home. And one of the issues that many of our guests have mentioned is that you can't get a caregiver for 4 hours a day or 4 hours a week. They want an 8-hour day. The patient resents the fact that this person is sitting around half the time because they're not needed to help them with dressing or bathing. And I wonder if part of the public policy maybe should start with these home care agencies that say, can you get people, give them some kind of guaranteed work so that they know they're not just working 4 hours a day or 4 hours a week, and yet make it available to patients who only need a little bit of help.
Two things of note here. I think one, a lot of this work is very challenging. It can be very challenging physically, right? Because sometimes you are talking about physically helping people move from here to there, right? So there's that. It also traditionally has not been very well paid. There was a piece of President Biden's Build Back Better program that was really targeted towards the long-term care workforce. It got dropped, but people are aware of this challenge. But again, one of the from the perspective of families and individuals who have long-term care needs, already, for them, the cost of this is a huge issue. But for the long-term care workforce, relative to a lot of other paths these people could take, being that home health worker for people with long-term care needs, it doesn't necessarily pay as well as some other things. It can be physically demanding. It can be emotionally and mentally demanding in a way that some other opportunities they might have are not, or at least somewhat less. And so that home health worker piece of this puzzle is another thing that worries a lot of people who focus on long-term care. So this is not just status quo, hang on to the workforce that we have. We gotta ramp this thing up. And right now, looking forward, that's a challenge. And most families and individuals are left basically to kind of navigate this on their own, to figure it out on their own. That's a challenge. One promising thing in this space is that there has been experimentation with basically paying family members to be to be providing that care, right? Which kind of acknowledges one that a lot of this does fall on unpaid family caregivers. So you recognize the challenge that provides for those people, and then in a lot of cases, that's much preferable to having some stranger come into the house and have to get to know a new person. Now, again, that is a promising thing, and I think we could do a lot more to experiment with that type of an approach. Now, as people get older and needs increase, there are going to be there's going to come a point where for a lot of people where the family member may reach the end of their ability to do it, either physically or it becomes too technical or whatnot. The needs just increase. But for a lot of people, that is a situation that could that can and does last for quite some time. And by paying these family members, you can make that easier on everyone involved.
Can adult children who are paying for their parents to be in some kind of facility get a tax deduction?
That's a good question. I believe in some states that is possible. That's largely a state issue. Medicaid is also a state thing. We were talking about Medicaid earlier. And so, one thing to know about all of this is that it varies wildly from state to state. And so some states there have been tax incentives and tax-based things to try to encourage people to save for their long-term care needs.
Well, is there anyone in Congress or even in state legislatures right now who's making this an issue? I guess it's not really sexy enough to say, reelect me because I saved you all this money, but is there anybody that's really doing anything? And do we need an uprising of people in the middle class to say, hey, something's got to happen here?
I think we probably do need that uprising because, people have been kicking around proposals in Congress for decades. They just haven't got much traction. One thing I'm a little optimistic about is that there has been some rethinking about some of these things, and not just among Democrats, but among Republicans too. But there is a program called CARES that was recently passed in Washington State, and that's kind of an intriguing model. It is a mandate, at least for most people. There are a couple ways you can opt out of the thing, but it's basically a mandate. There are some problems with it. I think it only provides about $35,000 total, which again, you think about the kinds of figures we're dealing with. $35,000 doesn't take you very far, but it's better than nothing. But again, it's at least an intriguing model, and it's nice to see that there is some experimentation at the state level on these things.
Well, we certainly hope that listeners agree with you, and those who have put off thinking about long-term care will understand that this conversation is putting them on notice to start planning. Thank you so much for sharing your information with us. Our guest was Professor Robert Saldin.
Thank you.
Today on News You Can Use, we want to share some information that may help those of you who plan to age in place but have not thought it through. It's never too early to be prepared. Aging in place may be attractive both financially and personally, but one must be honest if you already have chronic health issues that require more care than you originally thought.
Financial planning should include a budget for expenses such as a private caregiver or a housekeeper you may need in the future. You should also consider physical modifications if you're intent on staying. For example, is there a bedroom on the first floor or a room that could serve as a bedroom if climbing stairs becomes an issue? Will you need a chairlift or an elevator as you age? Bars in the bathtub and toilet area are a must, and you may need to widen door frames if you use a walker or a wheelchair. Your shower or tub may need to be adapted as well. Some cities or states have government resources to help with these issues.
New technological devices for seniors come on the market all the time. So think about calling or monitoring devices like Alexa or Google devices if you plan to age in place alone. Smartwatches are good for fall detection and as a reminder of when to take necessary medications. Or consider the new medication dispensing systems you can use if you take a lot of different meds.
Aging in place is ideal for many, but planning is important. Your health and financial situation should be the factor that determines if you can stay in your home. And aging in place does not mean cutting yourself off from your community. Make friends who live nearby. Join a senior center. Get out of the house every day. Volunteer at a nonprofit and don't spend too much time alone.
Many healthy seniors decide they would rather age with others and move from aging in place to senior housing so they can share meals and activities with others. Whatever you finally decide about where you plan to live, planning will make any transition so much easier. And that's our podcast for today. Our thanks go to our guest, Professor Robert Saldin. You can learn more about Next Village SF at their website, nextvillagesf.org. Our theme music is from Hook Sounds, and Jason Dahlstedt is our engineer. And thanks for listening. We'd love to hear what you would like us to discover and discuss. Please contact us at notbornyesterdaypodcast.org and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and subscribe wherever you listen to our podcasts. All of these are free, and they help us know our audience better. Be well, stay strong, and remember, you weren't born yesterday. I'm Lynn Winter Gross.
And I'm Miriam Goodman.